Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. It's your weekly look at all things royal, brought to you from the Mail HQ in Kensington. I'm Jo Elvin, and joining me this week, for the first time in ages, is Sarah Vine, Daily Mail columnist for the Mail on Sunday as well, and Weekend Magazine. Alongside her, of course, is Daily Mail's diary editor Richard Eden, who I think just sort of sits there and waits for us to all turn up every week, don't you?
I stay here all week.
Not busy or anything. But no, we are busy today. There's so much to talk about. So let's get straight to the royal story that's in lots of the papers today about Prince William making a speech about racism in the UK. Now, Sarah, I'm going to come to you first. This was at the unveiling of a statue where he could have got away with something quite jolly and mild, and yet this is where he went. What do you make of that?
Well, I think he's probably still smarting from the things that Harry and Meghan said about him last year. Was it last year? I can't remember. Time flies. About, you know, racism in the royal family. Yeah. So I think he probably feels it's an issue that he has to kind of address head on, and I think that's probably quite a good way of addressing it. I don't think what he said was particularly controversial, but as you say, it was more than he needed to say. But maybe he just would like to draw a line under that, and just, you know, make sure that people understand where he stands on it.
Is that drawing a line under it? It feels to me, Richard, like he feels it's still hovering there and the family needs to do more.
I'm not sure that this was related really to, you know, Harry and Meghan's criticism in the Oprah interview. You know, their sort of awful allegations of racism against the royal family. You know, they thought they were outrageous at the time, and William was angry. You might remember he was asked about it, and he said, you know, we are very much not a racist family.
Yes.
He clearly felt very strongly about it. But this speech yesterday was a very serious one. It was a serious subject, and I think it's one that he would have wanted to do anyway. You know, it's all about the people who came from the Commonwealth countries after the war. They came in the 60s and have contributed a lot, but have also had problems. And he was addressing those problems with the Windrush scandal head on. And I think it's, honestly, I don't think Harry's involved in that at all.
I wonder if it's got something to do, Sarah, with, you know, we were talking last week about William in action putting his foot down about Prince Andrew at the Order of the Garter procession. Do you think it's just another indication that we've got a new William on our hands? He's decided to step it up.
I think he's now sort of edging towards being the Prince of Wales, isn't he? And that's right, he needs to do that. So he's being a bit more vocal about things, being a little bit less behind the scenes, just dipping his toe in the water, really. I mean, I think what he said about Windrush was perfectly reasonable. I mean, the Windrush scandal was very recent. People do still have problems. So I think, you know, I think that would have resonated with a lot of people.
Do you think it's borderline a political interference, a political statement?
It's different from Prince Charles's recent private comments that caused such a row about Rwanda, because in this case, when the Windrush scandal, which we should explain, was people being told they had no right to be here, even though they'd lived here
40 years,
after 40 years. So it was outrageous. But that's been addressed by the government, that's apologised. And so it's not a sort of live political issue. So he won't have caused any trouble by making these comments.
Well, that's that sorted then. But we're going to stick with the Duke of Cambridge for a minute to mark his 40th birthday. He's my sister's birthday twin. We spoke to Richard Kay, the Daily Mail's editor-at-large, who has covered the royal family for most of William's life.
I think he's becoming a more significant figure within the royal family. I think for a long time he was content not to have that role. The relationship with his father has not always been good. There's been a lot of friction between them over the years. They seem to have a better understanding of one another. I put a lot of all this down to the influence of Kate and the Middleton family and how they've, I think, have given him some new priorities in his life. But in terms of his royal role, he's slightly stepping out, if you like, of that long shadow cast by his father, and is intent on having his own views known. I mean, a lot of us have observed over the years that he's quite different in character and makeup from his father, and has much more in common with the Queen, and that he will take his duties as king in an entirely different way from those of his father. He clearly has issues that are important to him. The homeless one is one of, I suspect, the one closest to his heart, possibly because it was his mother who first introduced him to the plight of homelessness in central London. I remember going on visits with them when they would go out in the evenings. They were still quite young, William and Harry, but particularly William. And his mother would take him to places like the Embankment and to the Strand, to food stations. And I think those sort of visits have had an impact on him. He clearly wants to make it something that he's going to be involved in. So I suspect we will see him addressing those kind of things. I think what people don't know about William is that he has a steeliness in him. He sees the negative effects of Andrew, how he's damaging the royal brand, and he's strongly of the view that Andrew is holding back the family and therefore he cannot be seen in public. I think William was decisive in ensuring that Andrew had no central role in the recent Jubilee celebration. And he is strongly of the view that Andrew needs to go away and atone, at least for some time, and try and find some kind of role which takes him away from frontline royal work. A great sadness descended on William when his brother took the route that he did. But it was worsened, of course, by the unnecessary and ad hominem attacks, if you like, on Kate through those various interviews that he and Meghan have done in America. I think he's going to find it extremely hard to forget what happened, even if he can forgive. I suspect he can forgive. And people tend to gloss over the fact that William and Harry had the most extraordinary relationship throughout their childhood, and then in those formative years after the death of their mother, they formed such a close bond. I think that's what made the breach so much harder and more painful for William, because if anyone understood the obligations and responsibilities of monarchy, it's Prince Harry, and William wanted Harry at his side. Harry's not going to be there for him, clearly, but William will not shut the door on him. He will have him back, but I think there will have to be some fundamental changes in the nature of the relationship that Harry has with the royal family before William will allow that change to happen.
Richard Kay there. Sarah, he talked about the real pain that William feels about this sort of, this separation from Harry. It's not going away, is it?
No, and I think William is quite an emotional human being, actually, and I think he was, he very much took on that sort of role of parent with Harry after Diana died, and I think he looked after his brother, and he really was a big source of support. And I think for him it's a really fundamental betrayal, and of course the one thing that united them was their mother, and that's such a massive part of their lives, and so for them to not have that, they rely on each other for that shared experience, and now there's this massive wedge between them. So I think emotionally it's very hard for William, and I think he is someone who feels things quite deeply, and he's also emotionally very, not slow. When I say slow, I don't mean that means he's stupid. I just mean that he feels things quite deeply. He doesn't make quick emotional decisions. Yeah. And I think that, this schism has gone really, really cut deep, and I think he's retreated a bit, and he's a Cancerian. He's got a shell. He's in it. He's a bit sort of protective and angry, I think.
Sensitive water sign.
He's a sensitive water sign.
Yeah.
I mean, Rebecca English...
Sorry, I know you don't believe in that rubbish.
Rebecca English quoted people talking about the sort of grief almost that he suffered from the end of that relationship, really. But I do think Prince William is tough, and I think that he has put that behind him now. So yes, he was grieving about it, but I think he accepts
but
that.
But emotionally, Harry is the last real connection to his mother when you think about it, and it's a really big loss for him.
Richard Kay was also saying there that Harry's relationship with the whole royal family would have to change so dramatically. What could he do at this point to bridge that gap?
There's a lot Harry could do, but I really do think that he is keeping his family at a distance until his book is published. I really do. I think that he is going to be saying some things which will be unpleasant and will go down badly with Prince Charles and Prince William, and he almost sort of can't face them. I think that partly explains the awkward situation we had during the Jubilee and why they didn't want to spend time with each other.
But you saying about, William grieving that estrangement, that must be true of Harry as well. It must be.
Well, who knows? I mean, the thing about William is that he married somebody who was a really stabilising force in his life. He married a really solid person who sort of understands the brief and I think is very grounding for him.
You wrote about that the other day.
Whereas
didn't
I think Harry married somebody who is the opposite. She's destabilising force because she's there's a lot of drama with Meghan, in whatever circumstances, and so they both made very different choices. And I think the spouses in these situations are quite key because they are really important to sort of, looking after whatever you say about these people, they do have an enormous amount of pressure on them, and so they do need the support. And I think that there's been a real difference in their styles with this. But I think what's interesting about William is that he seems to have got closer to his own father, which, again, after Diana's death, there was this sort of iciness a bit, and I think a lot of recrimination. And I don't know if you saw that documentary a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, where they talked about their mother. It was clear that both the boys, to an extent, blamed Charles for a lot of what had happened, felt very defensive of their mother. But William seems to have come back to Charles now, and their relationship seems to have deepened and matured, and there seems to be a lot of forgiveness there, whereas Harry has gone the other way, and there's almost less forgiveness, and he's still very angry. And all of this anger is coming out in these interviews that he does, and in the way that he, on the Jubilee, he left the afternoon of the parade. He went back to America on the afternoon of the parade. He didn't even stay until the end. I thought that was quite significant. And so this book is part of that fury that he clearly feels.
Yes, I think you'll find there's a lot of anger that will come out in that book.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, listening to what you say about the wives, I feel like Harry probably feels like Meghan has been his saviour.
Of course,
so,
yeah.
and
I hope so,
not destabilising, but good for him.
Or they are both playing out two very different responses to the trauma that happened to them.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's polarising because they're the opposite ends, really polarised. William has gone very much one way, Harry's very much gone the other. So it's hard to see how they're going to find that middle ground again.
Let's have another view of William and Kate that's sort of broken news today. A new portrait of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge has been painted by the artist Jamie Corrath to be shown across the county of Cambridgeshire. What do we think?
I hate those vampire wife dresses. I think it's too chocolate boxy for me.
I like them. I like
but
those
you're
dresses.
into fashion and I'm not,
Oh,
as people
right,
can
that's
see
me
from what I'm wearing. But I just think it's a bit chocolate boxy.
The artist says that he wanted to show the pair relaxed and approachable as well as elegant and dignified. What do you think?
I was so relieved when I saw it because I thought back to that picture, which I think is in the National Portrait Gallery of Catherine, and it was awful, really didn't do her justice at all. And I think it's extremely hard to paint beautiful people.
Yes.
What do you think they're looking at?
She undoubtedly is.
It looks like they're really looking like you can't sit with us
They're
today.
looking at the canapé tray, which is coming towards them at a cocktail party. Yeah. That's what I think they're doing.
And William's stance is so kind of badass. Do you know what I mean? He's like, it's casual.
I mean,
boss.
honestly, I don't think it's. I think it's I could see it's a very accomplished portrait.
Yeah.
I think what Richard says about it's very hard to paint Kate because she is so ridiculously pretty.
Yeah.
And so however you do it, you always end up looking a bit like Mills and Boon. I mean, it is quite Mills and Boon, isn't it?
Perhaps the best portraits of them will come when they're old and wrinkly.
Exactly. You could put a sort of Mills and Boon title on that, couldn't you? And it would work quite well as a cover.
It's definitely it does have that kind of style of those book covers.
Yes, those sort of 70s book covers. It's strangely retro, if you ask me. But I can see that it's very accomplished.
This artist is excellent. If you see some of his work, there was one portrait of Fatima, I think it was called, where it's very realistic, but very
Who would take the gig
portrait
of painting a royal? Because then you've just got people like us sitting around.
Yeah.
No. I would just say, I think whoever the painter has done, technically, it's really brilliant and accomplished, isn't it? You can't really fault it. It's more the tone of it is quite Mills and
William does look very slim, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah. He looks very much like, the hero of a romantic novel.
I like a matching tie with a dress, but let's move on.
Yes.
We've talked before on the programme about how we're seeing a monarchy in transition, and one question that remains unresolved is that of William when he becomes Prince of Wales. And here's what Richard Hay had to say about it.
I think the difficulty that both Charles and William have got, by implication, is that Charles's reign is going to be a short one. We know that. Yes, he could live as long as his mother, but he isn't going to celebrate a jubilee like his mother did. And once the Prince of Wales is sovereign, the focus on William and Kate will become even more ratcheted up than it is now, because they are the future. They're very agreeable children, will continue to dominate royal family events. And I think that'll be hard for Charles, because it means yet again he's going to be slightly pushed out of the spotlight in much the same way as he was by his late wife, Diana, and now he will be by his son and his son's family. William doesn't particularly want this, I have to say. I mean, he wants his father to have his go, and then it'll be his turn. But we are entering this era of elderly and middle-aged monarchs stretching way ahead into the distant future. I think William is aware of that, and he's aware about trying to keep the monarchy fresh and relevant. Charles will make changes, no doubt about it. There will be steps, slim down monarchy, we know all about that. I think William will take it much further.
Coming to you first, Richard, this links with comments you made last week about how Charles might be perceiving William's growing role.
Yes, what I touched on last week was reports I've heard that there are a few tensions there, that Prince William has been sort of throwing his weight around, as it was put to me, and Prince Charles is not very happy about it. I think it's, as Richard Kay mentioned, he knows that it would almost be a sort of dual reign, that he knows he has to consult his son and heir on decisions he makes, and that does make for a bit of an awkward situation, but it's just a reality of the age that he is.
What do you think, Sarah? Charles obviously deserves his time on the throne. How does he balance that delicate situation with having an assertiveness?
Well, I think the problem with Charles is that his destiny has been to be stuck in the middle, really.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, whichever way you cut it, that's what's going to happen to him. You know, he's been in waiting for so many years, and he won't be here for long before William takes over. And I think that must be really difficult for him. And I think he's dealt with it quite well on the whole over the years. I think he's made an impact. I think he's done his own thing. And I think that he must also feel very acutely the fact that quite a lot of people, if you ask them, will say that they think it should just skip to William. And I think that's very unfair, actually, because...
Well, I can't imagine that that's William's...
No, I'm sure it's not.
Yeah.
But, you know, sort of ordinary people I talk to, you know, you speak to just people, you know, chatting to... quite a lot of people say that. I mean, readers sometimes email me and say that, and why don't we just go straight to William? And so there's a sort of perception that, you know, Prince Charles is a sort of ghost in between them two, in between the Queen and William. And so I think if I were him, I'd feel a bit annoyed by that, genuinely. But that said, William has got to start to make the transition to being the Prince of Wales. So he does have to start doing more things, and as a result will become more assertive. How else could he not? I mean, how can he do that without being more assertive?
And then the coverage creates tension.
And then the coverage
it?
creates tension. So I think it's just a sort of, you know, I think it's a normal human response that Charles is having, and I think William's is also normal. I mean, he's about to, you know, his life is about to change. He's turning 40. It's always a big moment. 40 is a nightmare, as we all know. You know, it's the time when your children...
I'll learn about it when it comes.
Oh, yes, when it comes. But, you know, you're sort of not young, you're not old. Life is quite difficult. There's a lot of pressures, a lot of family pressures, a lot of what, you know, he's at that stage. So it's a period of adjustment. But, you know, it's lucky that they do have a period of adjustment, actually. And I think that the best thing they can do is to just put their fingers in their ears and just do what they think is right. Yeah. That's what I would say.
Let's turn for the moment to the Grand Old Duke of York, Richard. Now, an MP has made a move to try and strip him of that title. Is that right?
Yes, this is the Labour MP for York Central, Rachel Maskell, who's been trying to get a bill through the Commons that a mechanism should be brought in that he could be stripped of his York title. Frankly, she and lots of other people from the city of York are embarrassed that he carries their name, and it's something they want to adjust, but it's a very thorny issue, and it won't get government support, because it's something, the last thing the government would want to do is start bossing the Queen around and telling her, you know, that she should strip titles from her second son.
Oh my gosh, the complications just never end with that
But
one.
the problem with the Duke of York is that he is the weakest link. And when you have you know, Labour MPs basically agitating, you know, it will be a Republican agenda fundamentally. You know, they want to sort of get rid of the monarchy.
Well, there was a piece in Ephraim Hardcastle the other day about a suggestion he could be governor of the Falklands. What do we think about that?
What have the Falklands done to deserve it?
Exactly. Is it far away enough? I don't know. I mean, so they do have to find a solution, but I think probably in the Queen's lifetime, I think they should just retain the status quo for now. I mean, Charles and William will have to make a decision about that.
I wonder if Andrew's had any actual reaction to that.
And it would also open up a can of worms with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. There's an awful lot of people in the counties of Sussex who don't really want Harry and Meghan to be carrying around their titles.
Well, they're the Duke and Duchess of Montecito now,
Yeah.
aren't they? They are, aren't they? But anyway, so let's move on. Well, last week we had the Mail's royal editor, Rebecca English, in a very exciting appearance in the studio with us. Make sure you watch that one back if you missed it. But this week she's in Rwanda with the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, and she sent us this report.
Apologies for my slightly dusty appearance. It's been a very long, hectic and very hot first day in Rwanda, where of course I'm with the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall as they represent the Queen at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Now, it's turning out to be a very interesting trip for a number of reasons, not least because Charles and Camilla are the first members of the British royal family to ever set foot on Rwandan soil. And it will also be the first time that Charles has been here representing the Queen since he was nominated by the Commonwealth leaders to inherit the position as head of the Commonwealth from his mother, the Queen, when she eventually passes away. But today actually wasn't about private conversations or political pronouncements. It wasn't even actually about the Commonwealth. It was about the 1994 Rwandan genocide. For those don't know, it was a particularly horrific period in this country's history in which up to 1 million people were systematically slaughtered over 100 days by the ruling Hutu party. And the Prince of Wales was particularly keen to have this factored into his programme. And he and Camilla started the day by visiting the National Memorial here in Kigali, where 250,000 victims are buried. There was an incredibly moving moment in the museum there, where the stories of the children who lost their lives in this slaughter are told. And it's very poignant because you learn as a visitor what they were like as a child, what they liked to eat, what their favourite game was, who their best friend was. But they then go on to learn how they died, whether it was that they were killed in their mother's arms by a machete or burnt in one of the local churches. And you could see that Charles and Camilla were deeply moved by the experience. Later on this afternoon, the Prince of Wales went on his own to a church about an hour's drive south of Kigali, where 10,000 people alone were murdered in just 2 days in April 1994. You can still see the shrapnel holes in the roof of the church where they had sought sanctuary, and you can also see benches which are laden with thousands of pieces of blood-stained and dusty clothing, including children's bonnets and booties. And downstairs there are, the Prince viewed hundreds of skulls and bones from some of the bodies that were recovered. And he left saying that he hoped the world would take note of what happened here and learn the lessons from what had been allowed to unfold in Rwanda, but also the lessons of reconciliation the country has gone through as well. So quite a sombre and harrowing start to what will be a very, very interesting visit. And while there's plenty to discuss about the Commonwealth here in terms of the environment, youth opportunity, economic development, in actual fact, all eyes will be on the Prince of Wales and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Now, the two men haven't met since Prince Charles was reported by the Mail to have made comments in private about a controversial government policy, that of sending Channel migrants here to Rwanda on a one-way ticket. Charles is said to have greatly disapproved of this and even described it as appalling. Now, there's lots of opportunities in public for them to meet over the next few days, so all eyes will be on the body language. But I've been told tonight they also plan to have a cup of tea and a catch-up on Friday morning at the Prince of Wales's hotel. So to be a fly on the wall of that.
Rebecca English in Rwanda there. That is all we have time for in another fascinating episode of Palace Confidential today. My thanks to Sarah Vine, Rebecca English, Richard Eden, and to you, of course, for watching, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.